Today I have James Strutt from Property New South Wales, who we just discussed have been working together since 2021.
Yeah.
So James, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Well, first, it's great to be in your office, Rob. It's been quite a few years.
Welcome.
Yeah. So James Strutt, I've been in government for over a decade now, state government here. For my sins, I was an investment banker when I first moved to Sydney from Brisbane.
Yeah.
Did a bit there, did a bit in the mining sector. Always kind of involved in sort of assets, whether it was mines, whether it was real assets like land and property. But I guess I fell into a government role because I liked the opportunity that it was somewhat of a startup agency at the time,
Yeah.
that decade plus ago. And really the mandate was the government's got a couple $100 billion worth of property,
Hmm.
massive considering even in the private sector. How do we optimize and make the best use of that land?
Yeah.
And so, me and my team, we beavered away years and years and years, manual processes. And I think we've finally got to a point where the technology caught up with, I guess, what I always had in my mind
Yeah.
about how do we leverage some of those digital capabilities
Hmm.
to really take it to the next level and to really speed up processes, reduce all the waste that goes on. So I've always had an interest in technology.
Yeah.
Years and years ago. I guess it's been exciting to see what's happening more recently, and that's why I've really been pushing some of the work that we've been doing.
Right. And so just so we get a bit of an idea of this, how you're managing such a couple $100 billion worth of land. How big is the team? What does the process look like within an agency that large? Like how complicated are things?
Yeah, it's interesting. My area doesn't look after all that
Yeah,
assets.
yeah, yeah.
We've got more of a central coordination function
Yeah.
across the sector, but there's about 80 different groups or agencies in
Eight,
government.
80, yeah.
880.
Yeah.
So your transports, your educations, your health, your justice. So it's literally the complete gamut of residential properties through to train stations,
Yeah.
through to warehouses, schools, hospitals. And part of the problem we've always had is there's an information asymmetry, or
Yeah.
there's that how do we coordinate that many groups, that many people,
Yeah.
using emails and PDFs.
Yeah.
And it was a big challenge, despite best efforts in government trying to put a stick over the top of it.
Yeah.
We didn't really have the means until recently to
To
actually
do
be
it.
able to, leverage.
Okay. And so you're working like basically in Microsoft Suite, like PDF, PowerPoint,
Yeah.
email, Outlook, and you're managing all this stuff. When do you see an opportunity to say, okay, hang on, there is a technological maturity that means we should dip our toe? And so when do you see it? And how do you see it? Do you see, oh, I'm going to try and buy Salesforce? Do you see a product that you need to buy, or do you think that you're going to build it yourself? What did that look like?
I think, well, in the context of Land IQ, I mean, I think I've always kind of kept my toe in the water around the digital
Yeah.
space and particularly from an asset perspective. But I've been involved in a lot of deals or engagements with certain companies where they've got a managed provider that have got their own bespoke software that they
Yeah.
use to do asset management, FM, whatever. And just seeing the enormous cost involved in the setup of that, the management of that,
Yeah.
I guess I never really had my eye on something that was so bespoke and so locked into a particular
Hmm.
structure. Or I've just seen so many times where contracts change and that has to get unwound and it's just really messy. So
Yeah.
I guess the government's probably more recently started providing a lot of data as open data
Yeah.
to the sector.
Yeah.
And it's probably that with seeing, I guess, the advancements in things like network latency, like performance of laptops and computers.
Yeah.
Government is a bit of it's a
Yeah.
slow mover in this
Yeah.
debate.
Yeah.
And so a few of these things were converging, and it got to a point where we were spending a lot of money on doing, standard procurements and all of this. And I thought, let's just see what's out there. Let's test the market.
Okay.
And that was so we built it bottom up.
Yeah.
What are the requirements? What do we want to do? We actually had no idea.
Yeah.
That's why we literally went out with a bit of an ROI.
Yeah. What can we
What's
do?
going to come
Yeah.
back?
What's there? Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, you responded
Yeah.
as part of a response to that process, but it really kind of gave us a lot of ideas that we then molded into what ended up becoming the
The line IQ.
the
Yeah.
procurement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so people hear or understand, how long for like today, Land IQ is being used, and we'll move on from Land IQ pretty shortly. But how long from today to when the sort of the dream started internally within government?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd say probably 2 or 3 years after I started. So you're talking about mid 2010s is when I started thinking about this as a
Yeah.
concept. Uh,
When did the first like positioning paper or memo go
Yeah,
up?
I think it was probably more where the area that I was in got much more of a, I guess, a much stronger role from the government at the time
Yeah,
that, hey, we need to look at land use
yeah,
um, holistically, but not just as a financial, asset and resource. There was a tipping point probably about a year or two before that whole land IQ concept came to be, where we didn't know how to do it. So we basically got given this mandate. You need to look at land for social, for environment,
yeah,
for economic and job creation, all these different factors. And so we had to really start from the drawing board, because there was a very different way of thinking for government at the time, and
yeah,
thinking about, well, do we go and get a consultant ABC to just develop this from scratch,
yeah,
or maybe we can make better use of the data we've already got as
yeah,
government, plug it into a tool,
yeah,
and then we can set it up in a way that it can be used by other
yeah.
parts of the
So
sector.
that was a part of the vision immediately.
I'd always wanted it to be
Yeah.
something like that.
Okay.
It was
So it's a build. You're a builder,
Yeah.
as in internally. Let's build this capability or
Yeah,
this
I
software.
mean,
Yeah.
initially it was just to replace something we were doing. I saw an opportunity just to get an immediate ROI.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
spending millions of dollars on these procurements, and I thought, this is
It
not
doesn't make
efficient.
sense. Yeah. Yeah.
We get a PDF at the end of this. This is not
Yeah.
very
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
efficient
Yeah.
government. But obviously, as you know, we built it, and then people came and thought,
Yeah. Yeah.
hang on,
Yeah.
we can use that. And
But it took years,
oh
literally.
yeah,
Yeah.
and most of, I mean, I've sort of talked about all the technological advancements that have enabled this. But the hardest thing's been the people, to be honest. That's like, there's a embedded industry of people that work in planning and property
In certain
that
ways.
were trained at university 30
Yeah.
years ago, and none of this was even conceived at the
Yeah.
time. And so that's been the hardest part, is going, no, 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 actually, you can get accurate, if not more accurate,
Yes.
outcomes,
Yes.
fraction of the time and cost.
Yes.
Um, I think we've cracked, we've cracked that
Oh, I think
pretty
so.
significantly now. But
Yeah.
that, by far and away, that's where the biggest time burn was. It wasn't
I mean,
the
this is, yeah,
design.
this is always what we find is that sort of understanding what the organization is trying to do and what their
Yeah.
capabilities are and what the and all the, because often the organization is trying to do a number of things, and there's different, different functions may look at the same problem differently and emphasize different. And if you can actually get clarity around all of that, which is massively difficult, with 80 functions, then the technological output is generally the easy part. The hard
Yeah.
part is the it's not social, but the organizational agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Which that's, I think, what normally takes the years to do.
Yeah.
So okay, so you're working on Land IQ. I think then you're a technical person, so you've been programming all your life, or
Uh, there's probably a window before more recently where I wasn't. I just didn't have the time.
yeah,
Young
yeah,
family, busy, that all that sort of
yeah.
stuff. But no, I'd say through high school, through university, and probably early years of career, was still doing it.
So you're not afraid of code, but you're not a professional programmer.
No,
Yeah,
no, no,
yeah.
no.
You're like an Excel warrior.
Yeah, I
Back then.
mean, I was beyond Excel. I mean, I was, in sort of C
Yeah,
plus, and there were some languages I was
you can.
using, which
Yeah,
are
yeah,
obviously still around today.
yeah,
But more recently, as I picked it up again, a lot of the frameworks, apart from maybe like JavaScript, a lot of them just didn't even exist. So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
quite
yeah.
fascinating to sort of see how that's all
So that's
evolved.
happened,
Yeah,
and then I think the AI over the past
yeah,
2 years has emerged
yeah.
as a something that's changed the space.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's quite an interesting time. I mean, obviously, it's things like AI, they're not perfect, but the ability for an AI to teach you things
Uh-huh.
versus 10, 15 years ago, or even more recently, you look at Stack Overflow,
Yeah, yeah,
like it's such a more efficient process
yeah,
now. And to even understand, like, well, how could I do this? And go,
yeah,
well, here's 15 options in
yeah,
different languages. And you
yeah,
go, oh, hang on.
yeah.
That's been really the eye opener for me, is how easy it is
To
to
learn.
learn
Yeah.
and to really quickly iterate on things like that.
Uh-huh.
And I think not that I call myself a domain expert or anything, but it's a fascinating time where I think the hardest part of the whole coding landscape, it's actually not the coding.
Yeah.
Like particularly with AI and the picture,
Yeah.
right? Syntax, right? You
Yeah.
can
Yeah. Yeah.
iterate.
Yeah.
It's the problem solving and understanding the accuracy of the output to a
Uh-huh.
level where you can go, that's right, that's wrong with it, and you can iterate and
Yeah.
iterate
Yeah.
over it.
Yeah.
So I think the power is really shifting at the moment
Uh-huh.
to what I would call domain experts, so like your architects, your property development people, your people that are in the industry that may not be coders per se.
Yes.
I think that it's really starting to unlock a lot of that capability for that part of the sector.
Yes. And I think just for the listeners, the reason we brought you on or we wanted to talk to you is because you started shipping apps. So,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you sent me an email and here's an app that James Strutt has built, right? Where you're not a programmer, you're not building apps, right? As your JD, your core responsibility is managing a team and delivering this, this property transformation, very highly technical, but it's this domain shift where all of a sudden you can do it without dying. You know what I mean? Like one person can actually do both roles.
Yeah.
If they have a background, I think I think the dream of the AI is that anyone can just type in, like, give me an app that does X. No. My gut is that's a ways off.
No, and I think it's just to sort of clarify and, I think that if you don't have a base level understanding of how it works, the programming side of it,
yes,
it's potentially quite dangerous. And risky because, the AI is very good at telling you what you want to hear and very good at creating things that might work, but may have security flaws or may not be scalable in a way that you have to completely, So I think you need to know some of the core concepts.
Yes.
But from there, it just exponentially increases.
It's like a force multiplier. So if you've got the base, agreed. Like there was that guy on on LinkedIn saying he put his private API keys and stuff on lovable.dev, and you know what I mean? Canonical errors and trusting the AI. Yes. No, agree. And the worst class of bugs are those bugs that you don't even know they're a bug. Like the output's wrong in some way, but it looks right, and the AI won't help you.
And I think just to go back to this, I think that's where a domain expert, as long as you've got that kind of foundation, you will be able to spot an issue or an error because you'll look at it and go, that doesn't make sense intuitively. Yeah. Even though you may not fully understand how the logic has got to that point, you can. Whereas if someone is completely green in a field and they do that, they might just blindly hit accept and off they go. And then depending on what field you're in, that could have pretty serious consequences.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So it's that professional or that domain intuition that is the safety catch. Yeah. Because your job is producing investment memos, say, and so you look at an output and you say, well, that doesn't make sense. Your IRR is wrong or the value's wrong. Yep. And I think what's very interesting to this is that this is actually solving a core problem around the software development process. Like, so have a software team and you're the same. Frequently you're explaining to devs that are very technically competent, but they don't know what you're talking about. And so they don't have that architectural intuition in my case. Yeah. And so they'll come back with a rectangle that's too thin. And of course, they don't know. So rectangles I've asked for a rectangle, but I've meant a rectangle shaped like a building. Do you know what I mean? And so there's that constant friction of the two sides, I think, is now starting to
and I think that it's interesting because, one could look at this scenario that's unfolding and say, well, does that mean that, the business side of things is going to basically just do all this stuff themselves? I don't think that's the answer.
As in become the programming.
I think that's dangerous for what I really before. But I think the time that's spent and probably the frustration, to be honest, on
on both sides,
is if and like I've done this with Land IQ actually as well, with some of the stuff that's quite domain specific and technical. Is how do I get what's in my brain into a mock-up version of what eventually we want? Yeah. And it just the clarity and the confusion falls away, right? Because then immediately both parties go, I immediately understand what you want and what you're trying to do. Yeah. And then the people that are experts in the software dev side, they can make it happen in the most robust, scalable, effective way. Yeah. And you're not wasting all this time redoing requirements and burning time and pissing everyone off.
Well, redoing stuff is just so painful for literally everyone. No, 100%. And I think this is where we saw this opportunity. It's interesting that, like, by analogy, I was an architect, and when I left architecture, I don't know, in about 2019, I had been working at what's called a computational designer now in architecture, which is almost this thing that you're talking about. They're a designer, domain expert, but they're a coder. And there's this scripting, all these scripting engines in architecture, which are sort of entry, easy level, easy to code for a non-coder. They don't have to be as robust as a web application with users because normally you're the only user. Yep. So those security problems just don't exist because you're executing the code on your own desktop. It's not on your machine. Yep. So it's interesting to see this actually now spilling out into an enterprise. And I think sitting on the internet as well, which I think most security problems come when you're hosting stuff on a database, using it in a browser, and you're transferring the information back and forward.
Yeah.
But that's why we built the SDK. So what we saw like at Giraffe was like, okay, there's so many people doing so many things. Like I worked as an architect in buildings for years. I don't think I ever did any of the jobs that you and your team are doing for property, even though we may have been working on the same buildings. I was thinking like a designer and you were thinking like a business or an asset manager or whatever it is. And that you can unfold that there's engineers and, retail analysts and whatever they are, walkability experts, like there's demographers, there's a million people looking at these assets, each within their own view. And so what we thought is let's build like an environment that's easy to code in, handles like your authentication, your safety stuff, all the professional computer engineering stuff, and then let people do their thing. We started it before AI came, but it seems like AI was sort of just napalm. It was just like, nitro on that. It just went because people could suddenly write.
Yeah, and I think
or prompt.
the fact that the stack that you've chosen to build in as well is probably the most well-documented stack.
As in JavaScript?
And React.
And React, yeah. Oh, which was explicit, yeah. I
mean, obviously you kind of need something like that for what you guys have as an app. But the other bit that I've sort of found quite interesting is, I could go and create my own app completely independently, right?
Which you have.
But
yeah.
Well, no, but I mean, even independent of the Giraffe environment.
Yeah.
But that's kind of not worth my time and effort with all the peripheral things that have to happen around that, around the security, around. And what I've found quite interesting is, we've obviously got Land IQ and there's quite a significant database and everything that sits behind that.
Yeah.
But then being able to leverage, the almost the internal hosting that you've got in Giraffe.
Yes.
Right. And I can show you some of this later.
Yeah.
But it's just another way where, I can develop something that works and not have to worry about all the accreditation and security and data because it's already being managed through it's sort of the shell that sits around the apps that I've been creating, which is it's just an interesting the architectural solution you built that actually enables people to just focus on the
bit. When we started, we had the analogy of like the kitchen, and there's the chef who's doing stuff, cutting cheese, whatever he's doing. We really are just plumbers, and I often say we are trying to do boring but necessary work, which is like securities permissions management, making sure the databases, architecting things like the undo stack or the just commodity stuff that is peripheral and everyone has to implement, but it's painful to implement well. And then allow the chef, so that when he wants hot water, he just turns the thing and the water comes out, and you know what I mean? And the gas is there. So all the bits that they need to cook are there, and then they can focus on their problem. I think that division of concerns where you're sort of saying, instead of let's divide them by human, like this is a domain expert, this is a designer, and this is a programmer, you kind of cut it the other way. And you say, these are the aspects of programming that should be handled by, by the program. And these are the aspects of that should be handled. So it's kind of a shifting in the way that the roles work, basically.
And it sort of puts AI in a box a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Because you sort of create you've created this sort of SDK framework of, well, how does one interact with Giraffe and with the components of Giraffe? But the AI can't then go in and change Giraffe under the hood.
It can't get to the DB. No, exactly.
So it's almost like you're containing. Like if you're going to go to that part, you're containing the AI versus say someone that just types in a prompt randomly and they go and their keys end up on GitHub publicly.
You can still hurt us. Like people have certainly created things which make like 10 million requests a second against our database, but we normally throttle that. And normally it's a smaller error than everyone's details have been leaked or something like that. So exactly. It's a risk management and a risk mitigation thing, I think, is the key way of thinking about it. So what do you think is next? Like, I think since 2021, it's been pretty dramatic changes. So we've got Land IQ, which is this big sort of industrial class data set and application that's built by and it's going out. You've built an application or two, which are significant applications, but in terms of scale, smaller, simpler than that. Do those work now together as an ecosystem? Like what do you think next? Plan IQ, but then also, I guess, more generally.
Yeah, I think the analogy I was sort of touching on before we started this was the last mile concept in logistics. It's you're going from the warehouse or the distribution point to the end end person that's purchased the
Yeah.
product. And I think that there will always be a market for the enterprise solution that solves the 80% of the
Yeah.
requirements. But I mean, we're even seeing this through Land IQ, right? It's that bespoke use case that is really, really important to an individual or potentially like a team.
Yeah.
I guess managing a product as a whole, you couldn't really justify the cost of doing
Of
that
doing it.
for everyone just
Yeah.
to satisfy that small group of people.
We
And
may
so
not even see it. We may
exactly,
not even know about it. Yeah.
exactly. So I think these capabilities, and all this is only going to get even more efficient, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you talked about 2021. We started this. ChatGPT wasn't even
I know.
around,
It's crazy. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
look where we
Yeah.
are
Crazy.
now. I think that that's really where this is going to start solving and almost creating additions to what's already been, which is basically what I've done with the apps that I've made. It's
You see a
taking,
gap and you just fill it.
yeah, and it's taking. Okay, well, we've done some heavy lifting in Land
Yeah.
IQ, and we've produced an output.
Yeah.
Now I need to take that and use it in a very specific
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
case
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where we're going to see more. And like I'd love for Land IQ and obviously for Draft to be able to enable that
Yes.
for less technical people as well.
Yeah.
And because I truly think that's where this is going. And I think, whether it's the AI or even just the tools that are built around
Yes.
all of this, I think we're going to find a situation where more and more users will want to do that. And it's sort of like it's very personalized software, really, at the end of
It
the
is.
day.
Yeah.
And people have got their own requirements. They may want to add something here or there. And
Yeah.
I just think the democratization of that's pretty cool. I'm sort of seeing it happen. And
It's super cool.
yeah.
I mean, what do you think about the skills composition? So you've had this experience of doing what is a digital transformation, as in you've taken some processes within an organization and digitized them, probably at one of the biggest scales. I mean, it's a very large project. There could be bigger, but there would be like defense or banks or something.
Yeah.
What are your takeaways? Like, what would you, if you were speaking to a large firm thinking about this,
Mhm.
what would you advise them as of 2025 with all your understanding where the technology is now and also what you've done? Like, what would?
Yeah. I mean, maybe we don't talk about the change management side because that's kind of a universal truth
Yeah.
of you will have to shift a lot of significant decision makers and technical people into that sort of technical
Yes.
space. But if you park that, I mean, I think the data is critical.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many examples where companies try to use automated parsing and like if you just get the data
Somewhere.
in a standardized structured format,
Yeah.
it actually just makes a lot of this stuff so much easier.
Yes.
Building apps, digitizing, whatever.
So is this like for you guys was the cadastral like
yeah, I
data?
mean, we didn't. I mean, we as in property and development, we didn't have to do that ourselves.
Yeah.
I think we were probably another enabling factor in all of this. Is there was a pretty concerted effort, particularly by Victor Dominello and sort of the drive he pushed in this space around let's get e-planning all digital.
Yeah,
Let's
so
get
good.
spatial services. It's completely unlocked a lot of even the stuff that I'm doing myself.
It almost felt illegal. I remember when you start and there's like, just so people understand what this is just agencies within the government would, particularly spatial layers, but actually other layers, and they would just publish these APIs. So you could just go on and just hoover this data down.
Yeah.
And they were doing it as a public benefit. It was such an enlightened, smart thing to do because it unlocked so much.
Yep.
So I remember when I was at Cox Architecture and I would be like, oh, wow, I can just pull all the zoning data down. I don't have to read these PDFs and it's just there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's immensely powerful.
I think the other thing too, which I'm really trying to push this in government at the moment, but and I'm sure big corporates would be a similar situation to this, where you've got lots of divisions, everyone's sort of doing similar things, but in different silos. And data or outputs are being procured, and they're all locked up in these little agreements that mean you might have that amazing underlying
data,
but you can only use that bit for this very specific purpose.
The contracts are bad.
And so really enabling that to be more freely accessed is like
so better procurement kind of info of data
upfront.
Upfront. And understanding that you may not see the use case now over there, but you may as well procure it simply.
I actually think there's joint commercial benefit to doing something like this. So like if I'm a consultant doing a flood study, right?
Yeah.
And Council A pays a few $100,000 for this flood study.
Yeah.
Rather than just being used once and put in a USB in account or whatever. Wasn't there an agreement we say, okay, well, you can use this, but if it's used in any capacity that it's commercially, utilized, that there's some sort of kickback. or
100%. Yeah, yeah.
and then so there's sort of a mutual benefit there. I just think that we need to be thinking more smartly about
This.
making this data available,
Yeah.
even if it comes with a cost here or there. It's
Yes.
still people will find a way to to
To
use
do
it.
it. I think
Yeah,
the logic is there, is in once the information wants to flow, and if you've got that flood study, there is a huge pressure to reuse it.
yeah,
But there are legacy reasons why, time and materials and business models, and the mean that it's not always simple.
yep,
But I agree. I think, we had this idea ages ago around like people do site surveys and they pay a surveyor and it comes to your
yeah,
house, just pay 5 grand, whatever it is, you get a survey.
yeah,
And then often then you sell the house, and then 5 years later, someone else does a survey. And you're like, oh, couldn't you just get that survey? And maybe the surveyor's like, no, but then I don't make another 5 grand, but it may actually be better for that surveyor just to sell it for 1 grand, which is pure margin. Do you know what I mean? Because they just
yeah. You just license it out.
just license it out. But it's just thinking all those things through and building
Yeah,
the mechanisms out.
yeah.
Um,
But I do think those are the data, apart from the change management, that is the biggest blocker because the technology is there now. I
yes.
don't think and it's so affordable compared to what it would have been, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. And what would you say, like at an individual level for people? Like
Mm.
the skills that you've got, I think are very unique or fairly unique in the world right now, as in a technical coding background and then a business function.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that something that you think is going to be rewarded massively going forward? Is that like if you were speaking to someone who's at uni, would you
Mm.
say, hey, just do some code credits,
Yeah.
learn
Look,
JavaScript?
well, look, I've got three sons. I'm gonna get all of them to learn computer science and programming.
Yeah.
In addition to whatever, I mean, or maybe that's not what they want to
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
But look, you see a lot of stuff online about, programming's dead. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
job's going to be gone. It's all being automated. I don't think that's the case. I think that, I actually think that apart from maybe some of the, robotic type work, that AI won't actually take over many careers.
Yes.
I think it will be people that know how to use it.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of been one of my motivations.
Yeah.
Look at it going, well, I need to understand this enough to use it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be blindly going into this, just doing whatever. So, look, I think that's the people that I think will win in the next
Yes.
10, 15 years are going to be ones that learn how to use all of this technology
Yes.
alongside a domain
Yes.
expertise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You will, yeah,
You have to do both.
you will have to do both.
And I think you said earlier that it's efficient to learn now with the AI.
Incredibly, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like it's not like you have to have two careers or two lives, because you can actually compress it.
No, and I think, if anyone's listening to this and has been dabbling or, should I, shouldn't I think that at the moment there's this interesting sort of AI arms race in a way that a lot of the companies are offering services for free. So if you go on a Google Gemini now, you can use their top models for
For free.
free
Yeah.
in their UI. Of course, that means that they're using the data
Yeah,
for
yeah.
training. But if you're just using it for learning purposes,
Fine.
I don't think that's going to be around for
Yeah.
permanently.
I don't think so. It's burning money.
And it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. They lose
So
it.
I think that there's probably a limited window now where there is this sort of
to learn, use it.
free
Yeah,
opportunity to really quickly
free
learn.
lunch.
So
Yeah.
just absorb it
Eat
all
up.
in.
Yeah. That's it.
That's what I've been trying to do.
Yeah.
And I tell everyone that I speak to about it, it's like,
Just do it.
get on there.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
free for the moment. But you have to be pretty resilient because it's not a
It's
magic.
a big
It's
lift.
not a silver
Yeah.
bullet. You can't just sort of go, oh, how do I do this? And it does require quite a bit of
Yes.
dedication to learn it.
100%. And I think it's only really useful, like you said earlier, once you actually understand the core principles. Like if
Yeah.
you don't understand the first principles, it's almost more dangerous than not using it.
Yes.
So get your head around the first principles.
Yeah.
And that's interestingly, I think, you said like why we chose the frameworks. We when we started, we had a choice around React or Vue or whatever. And we were like, let's use React because most people use React. And then our backend is Python, and let's use that because it was, it's Django, it's well used, it's been around for years, it's built from first principles.
Yeah.
And so Giraffe, our product and our SDK, it's just a database and a GeoJSON editor, and we're using Mapbox and 3JS. There's no obfuscation. It's very much a bare bones first principles tool.
Yeah.
So then you can do whatever you want with it because
Yeah.
by design. And I think that that helps, because then you ask the AI a question, hey, how do I do this with GeoJSON? And the AI's got heaps of information on GeoJSON.
And also just apart from all the forum stuff.
Yeah.
it's documented
to the nth degree. Yeah, it's
and people
crazy.
have
Yeah.
created all these sort of
Yeah,
libraries that
exactly.
are on
Live.
top of things.
Exactly.
There's just so much. Whereas if you got done some really, really bespoke or like
Yes.
old language or something,
Yeah.
you just wouldn't be there.
No,
And it
exactly.
would work.
Or worse, we'd invented our own, like Giraffe
Uh,
script or whatever, which so many people do. I'm
yeah,
like, "Oh, I don't need to learn bloody Giraffe script. I just want JavaScript."
yeah,
Um,
that's it.
yeah. I think one of the cool apps that you built just on that was you had this is actually a very good example, is you had a use case which was exporting a PowerPoint,
Yeah,
right? And we've built presentation builders for PDF, and we've built them for this, and you're taking basically what's on the screen and you're exporting it in some format.
yep,
But we never thought of PowerPoint because, again, we didn't know much about it. I've never used it, and none of our customers really were making that much noise. And then you found a JavaScript library that does like what PowerPoint JS or whatever it is,
yeah, yeah,
and just makes PowerPoints.
yeah.
So it's so crazy
What? Yeah,
and free.
but it is free
Yeah,
actually. Yeah, and I think that what you're touching on is also another interesting point. Like I had a lot of experience in PowerPoint
yeah,
for my sins again,
yeah,
pitch decks, whatever, right?
yeah,
But because of that, I understood really quickly. I looked at the JavaScript library and go, oh, okay,
yeah.
you're creating a master template, you're doing this here.
Yes,
It
exactly.
clicks in. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
Whereas our
probably,
guys would be like, "What's this?"
yeah.
Yeah,
So you mean you might have people that watch this or your customers that you could pick an architectural software, but it could be anything,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But they know that software really well,
yeah,
but
yeah,
they
yeah,
don't know the language to connect it all
yeah,
into.
yeah.
Um, that helps massively. If you know the end,
Where you going?
what is the
Yeah,
library trying to control?
yeah,
Yeah, so that, and it's an interesting way. If you go into Google, any of the AI, and say, I want, number one, they'll tell you the libraries that
yeah,
exist,
yeah, yeah.
but then you can say, well, teach me how to use JavaScript and React in a way that enables me to do X with
Yes,
this, and it will customly develop like a
like
tutorial, a
yeah,
training
with
for
the
you.
endpoint.
That is, so you almost sort of, you're not doing all this rubbish, not rubbish,
Yes.
but these examples, you go, I'm never going to do
Yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
how the hell are
yeah,
you
yeah,
going
yeah.
to
That's right. To-do list. Yeah,
do
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, all that stuff.
yeah.
So you can very much learn with a very defined output in mind that is like your
It's
work.
pretty. It's pretty amazing.
It's,
It's like a.
it's
It's like a tutor. It's like a private tutor.
that completely tailored to whatever you're
Yeah.
trying to do.
And I think
Right?
where the again, just to re-emphasize this, the fact that you not only know about PowerPoint, but you also know the kind of presentation
Mm,
that's your deliverable, as in what your audience wants. So
yeah.
you're not creating rubbishy slides. Whereas if we were building it, would be kind of shooting straight into the dark,
Yeah.
being like, I hope that they may want this from a PowerPoint, as in maybe they want a footer, maybe they don't, maybe they want a big heading or a small one, whereas you know exactly where you're going,
Yeah.
which is
And that's like this come back to that last mile comment. I
yeah,
think it's actually easier when you've got a very defined outcome you're trying to
100%.
deliver
Yes,
versus, well, what are all the possible
that's right.
permutations that
Yeah,
people
yeah,
may
yeah.
want? And you go, no, I just want this.
Yes, yeah. Because
Do
architects,
it.
oh, we want a black background and a this and a this, and then you know what I mean. So very frequently we end up like almost getting overwhelmed. You try to
Yeah.
build the general PowerPoint maker, and
Yeah.
it's
There's too many options.
well, it becomes
You just end
PowerPoint.
up,
You've just
yeah,
built PowerPoint,
street.
and
We literally had this experience at Land IQ trying to equally, we have developed something that's based on Word,
yes,
but it got to the point where we were going to basically recreate Word.
Word, yeah,
It was no, okay, well, let's just leverage that capability and then I'll build on top of it,
yes,
which is not too dissimilar to what I did with the PowerPoint. There was already a framework there
correct,
that
yes,
knew how to
yeah,
interact and
yeah,
build with
yeah, yeah,
PowerPoint.
yeah.
Same sort of
And
thing.
it's that thing of being aware of what's in the ecosystem. What can I use? What do I need to repeat? What can I just, you know,
Yeah,
take?
it's like the fog of war,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
it's
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, I had no idea about 90% of these frameworks that are
Yes.
now there and available. So yeah, it's just fascinating just learning about all this thing.
I,
Oh, I can do that. Oh,
yeah,
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 I can
that's
do
done.
that.
Well, that person's already done. I'll just download it and yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts from you?
Um, Look, I think I would not have picked where I am now at the start of my career,
Okay.
which is interesting. I mean, I've always been a tech kind of person, but I think that my only advice would be to people for this to don't be scared by this stuff.
Yeah.
I think that I talk to people and I show them some of the things that I'm doing, and I almost immediately sense this sort of like, oh my god, like it's so complicated, but it's really not. I think people are, they're architects,
Yeah, they're doing
I,
complicated stuff already.
that stuff is harder.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, for the most part, I
Yeah.
think that once you have a base understanding of this stuff, it actually is it's very logical. It's
Yes.
very
It is. It's
straightforward.
very logical.
And that's not the hard part of this. The hard part is actually the problem solving that goes
Yes.
into
Yeah. Yeah.
all that. So I think for people, just jump in. I think that
Yeah.
um, what's the worst that can happen, right? Especially if you're doing it in the SDK environment. It's
Yeah.
pretty controlled.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm happy if anyone wants to reach out. I'm happy to sort of share a little bit of what I did. But
I
yeah,
reckon
just take the
you
leap.
should some of your prompts, like you've got very good. I didn't, I've never thought of that. Like, hey, ChatGPT, make me a tutorial that leads me to
Mm,
application state X. Like
yeah.
that's very smart.
Or a lot of trial and error.
Right.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but no,
But it's
no,
a good
that's
idea. That's a great way to leverage the tool. Because
yeah.
I'm often like, make me an app. And then once it falls off the rails, you're like, I'm just going to write this
Oh,
myself. This is, you know what I
there's a
mean?
whole cottage industry around this stuff. But to be fair, it works. So
As in the
defining
prompt
I
engineering,
like
like,
defining rules, as in, don't create a file size that's over 500 lines of code. Separate the concerns like
yes.
this. So,
And
and
the
you,
LLM will listen to you if you say
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
if you just jumped in and went,
Yeah, yeah.
little,
George, that,
you'll end up with this, yeah,
well, like 2 minutes in, you don't know. Yeah,
garbage.
yeah, you don't know.
So no, there is an art to that.
Yeah.
But again, there's so many resources online free
Yeah,
around
yeah,
all of
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Just go into Google
Whilst they're still free.
while it's
Whilst
still free.
Gemini's
Yeah, yeah,
still being subsidized by whoever's paying. I don't
yeah,
know who it
yeah.
is.
I don't know. Anyway,
SoftBank. Thank you.
yeah.
Um, awesome. Well, thanks for coming. I think that's really interesting. I think the next, I like 2021 to 2025. I also didn't pick it, and I think 25 to 29 is going to be. I don't think the disruption is slowing. I think it's going to just spread. You can see the vector where we're going.
Yeah.
It's just going to more technical, more mixed people doing more last mile. I love that stuff. And it's going to be very fascinating just watching it happen.
And I think I actually think it's going to create a lot more opportunities than it replaces all of this stuff.
You think?
Yeah, there's opportunities. There's, even this technology that's almost been created
Yes.
and things that we didn't think we could
Do.
leverage.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's quite exciting time.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
No, agree. Awesome. Well, thank you.
It's all right.